This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. From the big plays to life's everyday moments, see it all in sharp focus with LASIK at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIKs.
Oh, they did a stunt. They got too pretty. They got too pretty. Cool. The motor, bro.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoya here from the Soonerscoop.com studios. It is a Monday, or August 18th. I almost said June. August 18th. We are so damn close to the start of the college football season. Obviously, week 0 stuff happening over in Dublin. I think that's where the main occurrence will be. Yep. Iowa State, Kansas State coming up on Saturday morning, which I'm very excited about. Really, actually good game to start the season, especially in the Big 12 where there's so many questions. OU's not in the Big 12 anymore. That might be breaking news to you. This is a recruiting report. That was Jake Kreul that you saw Oklahoma commit. He started his season for IMG, a very dominant performance. I know our buddy John Garcia from Rivals on 3 was down there watching that at IMG. We'll get Josh McCuistion's thoughts on that, as well as Tank Carrington joining the party in Norman. He makes a commitment on Friday after decommitting from Florida State on Thursday. Before we do that, though, let us tell you about our good friends over at Poncho Outdoors. All you got to do is go to PonchoOutdoors.com/Soonerscoop for $10 off your first order. Soft right out of the box, right amount of built-in stretch as well, which is good for some of the bigger guys like me. Lightweight, breathes incredibly well for the hot summer months that we're going through right now. George, you got the hat.
Yep.
The Poncho Angler hat. It's pretty sweet. Josh McCuistion with the one of the Poncho shirts, I believe. He finally got his box in. The hidden zipper pocket is good for your iPhone. UPF 50 sun protection, free shipping and returns, free exchange as well. The ultimate outdoor performance shirt for men if you're going to an outdoor barbecue, if you're just going to be outdoors in general, or maybe even a tailgate here coming up in Norman over the next couple of months or next couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks to be exact. All you got to do is go to PonchoOutdoors.com/Soonerscoop for your $10 off your first order. That is PONCHO outdoors.com/Soonerscoop. Without further ado, we bring in Josh McCuistion. Josh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How are we this evening?
Guys, doing well. Like, does Oklahoma have a little recruiting momentum for us to talk about? Like, it feels like we've been waiting for, 2 months for things to start breaking their way. And in like 4 days, they pick up 2 defensive line commitments. So, I mean, it feels like maybe the wheels are turning in their direction finally.
Unbelievable. I guess not unbelievable, but a very positive run for Oklahoma. Obviously, it started out with Jake Kreul last week, Josh, and we saw him. He made quite the impact there at the beginning of his season for IMG Academy.
Yeah, there was, and again, it's a perfect storm where IMG is playing with all the talent we know they have. And then you add in that nobody else is really playing yet. And so there was a lot of media, a lot of, various, like the All-Star Game outlets, like a lot of, the guys out there scouting talent, that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of people that we all know on the sidelines of that game. And Jake Kreul had 3 sacks, not just in the game, but 3 in a row. Like, guys, I've watched a lot of high school football. I don't think I've ever seen that. So that's a pretty cool thing. And, of course, after the game, talked to a lot of the media on hand, including, Eddie, you mentioned John Garcia, and pretty much said, I'm done with this. And I know from what I've gathered, I think Florida is going to kind of continue to try and stay in his ear, trying to give him something to think about. But from his comments, I think Oklahoma fans have a lot of reason to feel good about his decision.
That parlays into Friday's announcement, and excuse me, I think it was Friday afternoon. It seems like it's been a long time ago, but it was Friday.
It was Saturday.
Or Saturday? Was it Saturday? It was Saturday afternoon.
Yeah,
that's
Saturday.
right. See, these weekends, I'm taking them for granted because we know that they're going to be gone here in a couple days, but. Nonetheless, Tank Carrington does commit to Oklahoma on Saturday afternoon. He was committed to Florida State for the better part of the last, month and a half, 2 months. I think June 16th was his commitment date to Florida State. Decommits last Thursday, joins the Oklahoma 2026 class on Saturday. The 17th commitment overall. He's the second defensive tackle commitment in the class of 2026, joining Brian Harris. And I guess let's just start here, Josh. On the surface, it might have come as a little bit of a surprise that he made the move to decommit from Florida State, and obviously flip to Oklahoma. What kind of play is Oklahoma getting with Tank Carrington?
He is an interesting guy to kind of draw a comparison to because, guys, the first guy I see when I watch him is Price Macon. That's who he reminds me of. Although he's a bigger guy than Price was. Price, I think his final year at Oklahoma, he was about 249. And for those that maybe that name doesn't ring a bell, go back and watch the 2010 Big 12 championship game against Nebraska. It was kind of Price's real moment in the sun. I think he had 4.5 tackles for loss or some crazy thing in that game. He just really exploded on that one night. But with Carrington, you're getting a guy, he's not the biggest defensive tackle in the world, probably 6'1", maybe a little more than that, but very long-armed. I've seen stuff of like 77, 78-inch, wingspan, that kind of stuff, and that can make up for some height. Like you can make up that difference a little bit. But again, I think this is a guy that will need a little time to develop, put some, add some body weight. Kind of like a Grayson Halton scenario where he's almost a tweener right now, but I don't think there's any question of they want him on the interior. That's where they see him. I just think he's going to need some time to grow into that role.
Josh, he was originally, I think rated a 4-star, maybe even a 5-star at one point.
He's had a fascinating, just high school experience in general, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say, Josh, why is that? What was it about him when he, why did he drop, I guess? And can you explain kind of his recruitment path?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because he was a guy, originally he was class of 2027, and then he reclassified to 2026 and what I can kind of gather is kind of like what you were talking about, George. When he was initially offered by Oklahoma, he was a almost unanimous top 50 player in his class. A lot of people had a lot of big expectations for him. And so I think that was when he moved, I think it all accelerated some of the things I'm talking about where, okay, he's a little undersized. He's going to need time. Okay, but he's jumping it forward anyway, where a lot of the guys that you see that make that move, they are, already 270, 280 pounds or whatever. They already fit the kind of mold. So it's kind of an interesting choice for him. But, it is hard to say, and I know a lot of people kind of say, oh, he's transferred several high schools, he's moved around. I mean, he's spent time at Gorman. Now he's at Lutheran in Crean Lutheran in California. So there's been some volatility, obviously, and I know that kind of sets everybody's alarms up when you talk about the transfer portal era and all those sort of things. But again, this is a guy. Guys, Oklahoma could have gone in a lot of different directions. There was a lot of players kind of at this level of expectation, however you want to put it, where you could say, okay, Oklahoma could have made that call. They could have gone back in there. But this is a guy that Jim Nagy signed off on, Todd Bates was in on. I mean, they both were involved in kind of recruiting him away from Florida State. So there's a level of comfort there. They think that this is a guy that they can get something out of. They feel he can be useful. And I think as long as people don't have expectations for him to come in and be, Jaden Jackson or David Stone or one of these guys, if everybody will be patient, give him some time, there's some physical tools there that are useful. They're just going to need time to develop.
Josh, I also wanted to just ask you quickly, how did he get on OU's radar? Because he's not one of the guys I feel like, and maybe I'm just misremembering, he wasn't somebody that we were talking about, months ago that Oklahoma was maybe pursuing. I don't know if that's because his recruitment was going in a different direction at that time, but how did, I guess, he originally get on OU's radar?
Well, again, he initially was out at St. Francis in Maryland, where, Oklahoma at one time, and again, this dates back to the Jeff Lebby situation, the kind of timeline where Oklahoma was recruiting, the quarterback that started at Mississippi State last year, Michael
Van Buren.
I'm forgetting his name. Yes, that's now over at LSU. So he was there as a young guy and kind of had made a name for himself. And so I think there was a lot of that was the initial, they just saw him and okay, this guy's big, he's athletic, he's super young. I mean, at that point he would have been a freshman in high school. So that was how it initially started. What I'm interested to find, I need to sit down and have a talk with James, kind of where it restarted. That's what's really interesting to me is where did this come from? And I'd love to tell everybody, oh, I got the answer. I haven't had a chance to sit down and talk with him. That's supposed to happen here in the next day or so. But my general feeling is just that Oklahoma kind of kept tabs on him. And again, like I said, the market kind of changed on him a little bit, where it was a lot of like, oh, this kid's going to pick between Michigan and Alabama and Oklahoma and Texas and all these other schools. And I think when he picked Florida State, he basically picked them over, I believe it was Kentucky and Arkansas. So again, all SEC, high, P5 level programs, but not quite the market that I think was there. And I wonder if Oklahoma kind of saw it and said, hey, we could do something here. Maybe this is a guy that can help us. We build some depth in our room and a guy that we can develop over time. So I think really, like I said, the early I understand. Like that was kind of proximity. They were around him, and I think it's pretty clear that that was a point in time when Oklahoma really was making that DMV area a very focal point of what they were doing. But now with, like I said, with him spending time at Gorman, now he's out in California, I think it was probably a somewhat of a market-driven decision where I think they found a guy that they knew they liked, that they could probably bring in and do so and kind of fit within what they're looking to do as far as price point and some of that stuff.
We talked about Miguel Chavis last week after the Jake Kreul commitment. Obviously, Todd Bates certainly has his current position group in really good shape. I know that we've talked about the interior guys pretty ad nauseum here over the course of the preseason for Oklahoma. They are now at 2. Tank Carrington joining Brian Harris. That could grow to 3 by next week. Just about a week from Tuesday with the announcement of Tron Richardson. Oklahoma and Virginia Tech still gunning kind of to be the top 2 that he's going to choose from going into his August 26th announcement date, Josh.
Yeah, I think anything outside of those 2 would be pretty surprising at this point. And honestly, if you're Oklahoma, I think you feel pretty good either way because, we've talked about this before. If it's Oklahoma, obviously, great news. If it's Virginia Tech, I know people don't register it because everybody's focused on OU and Florida and Auburn and some of these other situations that are a little more in the forefront of college football. But there's no question Virginia Tech needs to go out and do some things this year. And if they don't, I think there's a chance you can double back around to Tron Richardson and maybe pull something off. But as things stand right now, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think Oklahoma's in a good position. I've heard nothing to change. I think we first talked about that a couple weeks ago, guys, as a guy they were kind of making a run on. I've had a few ask me, does James Carrington affect Tron Richardson? To what I understand, it does not. I think they've always wanted 3 in this class. I know they like Brian Harris a lot. Now you have James Carrington. And again, Tron's a guy, and I keep saying it, he reminds me of Marcus Strong. I think it's a guy, really good frame, good body, good athlete, that if given enough time, I think you really could have a good player.
Josh, of those 3 guys, if they were to land Tron Richardson, is there one of those 3 that you're like, man, this guy has a chance to maybe contribute as a freshman, or do you think all 3 are kind of in that project type range?
If there was one I would pick, it would be Brian Harris, just because of the body type, the athleticism. He's playing high school ball in Florida, so he's facing quality competition there at Mandarin. I see him as a guy that I think has a little higher ceiling, and so I think that is just something where you could say, okay, maybe a lot like David Stone last year, where okay, he's not ready. But anytime we can sneak him some snaps, we want to get him on the field and have him, eating up 10, 12 snaps a game if we could find a way to make that work. So I think he's possible. The other 2, I'll admit, if that was to happen, it would surprise me. But again, guys, nobody was talking about Jaden Jackson, and now, the reports you're hearing out of him as a sophomore are unbelievable. So I think anything's possible, but I definitely think Brian Harris is the guy I would keep an eye on in that trio.
We'll be hearing much more from Jaden Jackson on the practice report that you can see here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel coming out of Friday's post-practice availability. We talked about Brent Venables and everything that was going on there with his media session on Friday. Did that over at the stadium. Josh, it seems like, we had talked about this 2026 recruiting class, and we had talked about you're going to have to flip some guys at some point. That happens with Tank Carrington. What can you tell us about Kaden Hall, who committed to Florida back in June? Certainly seems like Brandon Hall and the Oklahoma defensive backfield, they're not stopping. They're trying to still continue to recruit him. Where do things stand? Corey Bender had a story on On3 Monday morning about Kaden Hall out of Milton, Florida.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting. Good story from our guy Corey, a guy I've known a long time. And, just catching up with Kaden Hall, and he basically said – the only school that's still kind of coming around is Oklahoma, and I know they are super high on him. This is a high-end safety out of the state of Florida, and I talked about this. I want to say it was either during the podcast or last week's recruiting report where I mentioned, there's this volatility in the SEC where you look at Auburn, you look at Florida, even, let's be real, you look at Oklahoma. If things don't go on the field the way they want them to, there's going to be some guys that are back on the market, just like I was talking about with Tron Richardson. So, to me, Oklahoma and Florida have had some overlap here where you see some guys that I know Oklahoma really liked. Obviously, Davian Gross, who we talked about a lot last week. So, he's one of those guys that I think if it starts off shaky for Florida or if things start looking bad, Oklahoma's going to push that pedal real hard because he is a guy that loved his trip to Oklahoma when he came back in the spring. And, guys, the nice thing about Kaden Hall is this is a guy that hasn't taken an official to Oklahoma. So they still have that bullet in the chamber if they can get him to come to Norman. So he's an interesting guy. Like, again, I definitely think he is expecting to go to Florida. I think it would take something probably going wrong at Florida for that door to really open. But at the same time, that's not out of the realm of possibility. I think that could happen. And, again, we saw this last year with OU with a few guys where their season got a little shaky and a couple of guys, made moves in other directions. That could pay off for Oklahoma. They get off to that strong start like we've talked about on the podcast and everything else that we do. If they can do that and Florida's a little rocky, I think that door could open.
So, Josh, you think, and you kind of answered it there, but you think that Florida kind of has to struggle for Oklahoma to get into this, or do you think that there's if Oklahoma's playing well and Florida's playing well, could they still get into this race?
I think they could get a visit. And then at that point, okay, who knows what could happen? Because guys, we all know the expression Florida man. Florida man applies to recruiting as well. Florida, crazy things happen in Florida high school recruiting. It is the best, kind of popcorn ready recruiting to watch every single year. I mean, you go down the list of all the great stories. So many of them are in the state of Florida. The running back who wouldn't sign, couldn't sign his letter of intent because he was only 17 and his mom wouldn't sign it. She walked out of the building, left him there. He had to have his dad come down. I'm like, there are so many stories like that where you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen here. But I think for Oklahoma to actually pull the flip, I think it would have to get pretty rocky at Florida. But again, just if Oklahoma could just get a little window, just a little hope, maybe he takes the visit, and then maybe I've changed my tune. Maybe I feel differently after they've had him on campus. But I think that's the hill to climb to start with. You've just got to find a little window where he's willing to give you an opportunity.
Have you guys seen, this is the first time, I knew Florida's schedule is hard.
Yeah.
Have you seen the beginning of their schedule?
It's terrifying.
Yes. They play at LSU, then at Miami, and then Texas at home.
Good luck.
And then at A&M.
I think that's why there's been so much attention placed on DJ Lagway and what his injury situation is. And certainly it seems like, Florida's one of those schools that, albeit Oklahoma, they've had some guys nicked up throughout preseason camp. It seems like Florida's had guys that are down, and it's going to be quite a while. It's going to be more than those first couple of weeks of the season.
My point, too, is just we're going to know quickly with Florida if they're legit, whereas and not to say we won't know that about OU. OU's, first half the schedule isn't that brutal, but it's tough. But, certainly. I mean, if OU can go start, even 4-0, 5-0, whatever, and Florida's already got 2 or 3 losses.
You just want to give them something to think about, right? Yeah. Some of the guys that you're trying to flip. Let's go to 2027, a familiar name that you put it out to the War Room on Monday morning, Josh. Trey Moore out of Pflugerville, Texas, obviously, Weiss High School. He is the son of former Oklahoma quarterback and maybe one of my favorite players growing up, Eric Moore, Trey Moore. Where's Oklahoma sit with Trey Moore, and just kind of what kind of player are we looking at in Trey Moore? Obviously, his dad, incredibly athletic, playing for Oklahoma in the late '90s.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you're talking. Weiss has had kind of a crazy run of receivers. There was the player, I'm just going to forget his name, a couple of years ago that initially committed to Oklahoma. Then he flips to or he was no, that's not right. He was going to commit to Oklahoma. He was like a day into it, and then when he said he didn't want to take, he still wanted to take trips. OU kind of said, "Hey, okay, take your trips, but we're not no commitment." And then he commits to before he eventually signed. I think he committed to 4 schools.
Adrian
before
Wilson.
He actually signed. So, yes, that's exactly him, and really talented guy. And this is like another big physical outside receiver in Trey Moore, a guy that, I know I haven't had a chance to watch him live yet, but everybody I've talked to that I listen to really loves the kid, just loves his game. I definitely, as a kid, I'm going to make a point to see this year. I'm kind of finalizing my schedule over the next few days here. So, but a guy that, again, obviously – Eric's time at Oklahoma wasn't always picturesque, but you get the impression. I mean, this is a kid that, talks about, his dad going to OU, and that means something to him. And so you've got to like Oklahoma's chances here and think that's at least a meaningful leg up. But I don't get the impression like, oh, he's going to commit as soon as OU really pushes. I don't think that's the situation. But I do think Oklahoma is absolutely a contender in his recruitment.
What are some other schools maybe to watch, Josh?
He's mentioned Texas and Texas A&M. Obviously, for those that aren't familiar with Pflugerville, it's right up the road from Austin, not far away from, Baylor, from College Station. So there is plenty there. You get the impression that even though he's a bit of he's a top 100 national guy, there's kind of a feeling of maybe he stays a little more, not local, but at least regional. And so I think it could be, an old, Big 12 South, OU, Texas A&M. Guys, maybe Texas Tech. We know that they're becoming less and less shy about using the weapons at their disposal. So you can't rule anything out after landing Micah Hudson a year ago. And so, I think anything could happen here. But again, like I said, I think if you told me he comes down to his decision, it's a final 3 or 4, and Oklahoma's not in there, really the only way I see that happening is if Oklahoma had, done really well in their receiver recruiting or had already filled up or what. I think it would have to be something didn't work out, not because he wasn't interested.
Good story from Sam Spiegelman today on EJ, excuse me. I was going to say EJ because his older brother, I guess, is at Oklahoma Baptist. I never even knew that Eric Moore had kids. Trey Moore, though, you can read more on 3 on SoonerScoop.com. We got that story up. Let's stay in 2027. I think it's never too early to start looking at the 2027 class. We've talked about the 2027 in-state guys. This is a little bit more national, and I guess a name that might become familiar with Oklahoma fans, George Toya. How about that? George Toya.
Shout out.
The number 2 defensive lineman in the country. OU, UCLA, Oregon, USC, Miami. Basically a who's who list for one of the better defensive tackles in the country. Adam Gorney, our good buddy, had a story about him. And I guess, Josh, we'll just say, just kind of flat out, where was Oklahoma in just a seriousness level for the number 2 player in the 2027 class?
Well, just so we're clear for everybody out there is no S in front of this name, so you don't have to worry. George is not related. There's no conflict of interest. He can talk about this recruit.
That we don't know.
It's exciting for George. Yeah, exactly. Maybe they dropped the S. I don't know.
I will say the reason I also know about them, you guys may not remember this, but his older brother, Jay Toya, from UCLA.
Yes.
He was
never put 2 and 2 together.
He was, I think, in the portal for like a day. It was kind of like a David Stone situation where he was in the portal and OU was very interested in trying to get him. He ended up staying at UCLA.
That's crazy. I kind of forgot about that. And it would make sense why UCLA is still on his list, just with the family connection.
And he's his older brother is very good.
Sure.
So
George, that was the 2 years ago, the Dominic Lole.
That's right.
Wasn't it? Yeah. That's right. But yeah, with George, the impression I've got is that I think Oklahoma should host him for a visit at some point. I think that's going to happen. He seems very interested. At the same time, I mean, you hear a lot of Oregon buzz. I think Oregon and USC are just fighting a cold war in the state of California right now. Every player of a high value just seems like an absolute bloodbath between those two right now. But I think Oklahoma's made a good impression. Maybe that's built off the back of, probably a few conversations in that window that George is talking about, probably between Todd Bates and his older brother, and George's older brother, Jay. So I kind of like what I'm hearing. It's early. Do I think that that right now I'd pick Oklahoma to win? No, I wouldn't. But kind of like I've talked about, these are the kind of guys you've got to start getting on campus. This is what we saw them do in the 23 class and the 24 class. It's what started to wane in 25 and now more so in 26, where you're not getting as many top 150, not as many top 100 5 stars. Like, those guys aren't coming as frequently because you're not going to get all those. I don't care if you're out, Nick Saban's Alabama. Like, the fewer of those you get, the less of them you're going to sign. So you just want to get as many as you can on campus, because the more and more of that you do, the greater your odds are you fill out a strong class. And again, guys, with 2027, I mean, like we keep talking about, it could be such a huge year for Oklahoma in a positive way. Like, not this is on the precipice. It could be so big for Oklahoma in recruiting if they can just get started on the right foot.
Josh, how much would it help specifically in defensive line recruiting if Oklahoma goes out and Grayson Holton gets drafted, Dominic Williams gets drafted, Jaden Jackson's a all SEC type player, first team, second team, whatever. How much would that help too if this defensive line this year can go out and kind of prove what everybody thinks they can be?
I think it's huge, George, because when I talk to recruits and they sit down with Todd Bates and they go over tape, a lot of what he's still forced to show them is guys in Clemson uniforms, because they haven't consistently, they haven't had those guys where you can say, yeah, look at Grady Jarrett, like a Grady Jarrett at Oklahoma. They don't have that. So they're having to kind of bridge that. And I understand it. I know why I'd do the same thing in their shoes. But if you can have guys where you can say, look at Jaden Jackson, look at this guy, come in, he's going to host you on his official visit. By the time you get here, Jaden Jackson's going to be in the NFL. Like that kind of stuff, NIL is so important. There's no question about it. There is an importance on, the ability to win. Guys don't want to go to, garbage programs. I think that's pretty obvious to anyone. At the same time, I still think the card that can trump everything else is if you are producing NFL players at a high rate. Guys, let's be real. Michael Fasusi did not pick Oklahoma because they were his best NIL offer. He picked them because he thinks Bill Bedenbaugh's got the best chance to send him to the NFL. And that is because all that money is cute until you get an NFL contract. Like, that's great. NIL is fun and that's wonderful. It doesn't match your signing bonus in the NFL. So, there's just no doubt that a lot of these guys, to their credit, can still see this is what has value. This is what's actually important. And I think that is something that Todd Bates has in his locker. But if he can refresh it and make it some OU guys, I think that really does change the way guys look at OU a little bit.
That will ring true, I'm sure, with nobody more certain than that 2028 class. Continue to develop guys, continue to give them something to look at. Rivals.com came out with their top 100 on Monday morning as well. A couple of familiar names. We'll just start at number 5, Marcus Fakatoa, who I think burst onto the scene coming out of his 8th grade summer into his freshman season. This was 2 summers ago, if I remember correctly, when he came and camped at Oklahoma. 6'7", 260, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, USC, Ohio State. Have all kind of put their hats into the ring, or certainly impressed him early. You have Gage Waddell, had a story on him on On3 as well, talking about Eric Waddell, I believe is his father, coming in for the Michigan game. Josh, we go multiple ways with this. Let's just start with Fakatoa, though. Just in terms of Oklahoma, is there a real chance that Oklahoma could be a player when his day comes, even though that might be a couple of years down the road?
I mean, there absolutely is a chance. He's a guy that really loved Miguel Chavis. Every time I talk to him, he just talks about how well they connect and how much he loves Coach Chavis's energy. So I think there is something there. Guys, the thing, we were just talking about the defensive line, and Oklahoma and how well they've done. You look at the top 10, 3 players they are clearly involved with. You mentioned Marcus at number 5, Kellen Hall at number 7, who impressed, the hell out of all of us at this summer's camp. And then at number 9 is Asher, and I think it's Giotto, something like that. Another kid from Florida that's number 9 and is a guy that came up this spring, took an unofficial visit, checked out a spring practice, and clearly, has some affinity for Oklahoma, plans to return. I think he'll be back for a game. I don't know that he's finalized when that'll be. But yeah, they're clearly starting on the right foot in defensive line recruiting in 2028. Now, kind of the same question for all of these guys. Eddie, you've got to be willing to spend, because any of these guys, it's going to be pricey. Like,
Sure.
I don't care which of the 3 you're talking about, you're going to have to pony up some real NIL. And I know a lot of OU fans like, well, that's that. We talked about it. Defensive line, offensive line, quarterback. Oklahoma will spend there. So I think they can be in that ball game, but then it's a matter of who do they prioritize, because you're not going to get all 3 of those guys. You might have to focus on 1, maybe 2, and obviously other players as well, but you're not going to sign 3, 5-star defensive linemen in one class. That's just not going to happen. That didn't happen before NIL. So you've got to figure out who you really have a chance with, who you really want to focus on, and then kind of move forward from there. But I think Oklahoma is in the game with all 3 of these guys. Kellen Hall is going to be back from Michigan as well. He's another guy that will be on campus. Just heard about that here in the last hour or two. So that Michigan visitor list, we may have to carry a graphic so I can line all this out. But guys, there's already like 30 guys confirmed, and almost all of them are either commitments or offers. I mean, it's a really strong list they're putting together.
I was going to ask you. It seems like obviously that week is going to be one of the biggest games in the country, just in week 2 of a young college football season. But that visitor list is starting to look like what you would expect for when game day comes to town, and everybody else in the circumstance that comes with a massive college game day in Norman, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, Eddie. Gage Waddell, the number 3 player in the 2028 class, he has said he'll be at Oklahoma for the Michigan game. Now, I'm going to make a point to catch up with him. I'm very interested to see, is there some Tony Jefferson connection with San Diego, and obviously his dad, Eric Waddell.
Sure.
I know those 2 know each other. It's interesting because you haven't heard a lot with Gage Waddell. And for him to be like, yeah, I'm going to go out to Oklahoma, that feels like maybe there's something kind of stirring the drink a little bit. And I'm kind of interested to hear more about that.
No doubt about it. The 2028 Top 100, you can see that list on Rivals.com. Obviously, Josh, you've kind of highlighted the names to know for the Oklahoma fans on the Crimson Quarter. It's a great time to join the Crimson Quarter here as we now enter, 12 days away from the start of the Oklahoma football season.
Crazy.
Pretty insane to think about, Josh. I know that things have been going pretty well here over the course of the preseason. We'll get your thoughts on a little bit of a kind of a preview of the season to come, more in depth here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. But that's going to do it for today's recruiting report. Josh, we appreciate it. Certainly going to be interesting. Good news, though, for Oklahoma on the recruiting trail with the commitment of Tank Carrington. Just a good name overall, too.
Tank.
It's
For a
a
defensive
great
lineman.
name. It's a
You
great
love that.
name.
Yeah.
Means
Your D-line names are Tank and Tron. I mean, guys, that's a hell of a combo.
match that
like
with
that.
Jaden Jackson and David Stone. That could be a pretty good group if they were all
Stone
together
and
on the same time.
Tank
They just need to be
up front.
0 through 4. Just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Might have to talk to Jaden Jackson about changing his number. All right, that's going to do it. For Josh and George, I'm Eddie. We'll see you back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. There will be a practice report recapping everything from guys like Jaden Jackson on Friday in Norman. We will see you next time.